I must have been one of the small minority that really enjoyed Chaos Studios' Homefront. Some branded the game as a simple Call of Duty clone, a weak shooter with little potential. However, for those who could see through those cod-tinted glasses, Homefront is a shooter with bags of potential, if used correctly. This being said, the problems arising with publisher THQ put the future of Homefront in serious doubt. A sequel was said to be in the works by Crytek, but who really knows if we'll see another Homefront. Regardless, the following is my 10 ideas on how to make this sequel something really special and put Homefront well among the lists of must-have games for years to come. Number 1. Heavily expanded campaign. Something that really shocked me about the original Homefront was the fact that the campaign really didn't sell the idea of American citizens being helpless. Everyone you saw was very adept with weaponry, seemed to know how to reload, and used several guns. While this may have been the case for the characters, having been in a warlike environment for many years, it didn't sell the helplessness of the rebels that had been fighting their Korean counterparts. So this is what I propose for Homefront 2. Pull back from the linear style of the majority of FPS games. Pick an American city filled to the brim with landmarks and recreate it. Make it a playground that you eventually tear free from the Korean army. Much like Far Cry, where you can plan your attacks accordingly, you could scout out enemy locations beforehand and plant the American flag ultimately upon your victory. While I know many games seem to be doing this at the moment, Homefront needs to add RPG elements into the sequel. Hear me out here. Imagine starting off the campaign as a created character of your very own, having to learn how to reload your weapon for the very first time and getting better every single time you do so. Let your character evolve from never holding a gun before into a fully fledged resistance legend. This way, every time you fire your gun, reload your gun, use grenades, everything we take for granted in FPS, you're slowly building up your character's abilities in battle. This would help personalise the campaign and make it feel much more like your very own. In a game like Homefront, this seems a bit of a misfire, not in playing as a once ignorant American civilian who now has to deal with the harsh reality of Korean occupation. Number 2. Step back from Michael Bay style set pieces. Much of the gloss has dissolved from FPS games, where they rely on massive set pieces to wow the audience, when really a simple tale of your first kill could just be as strong if directed correctly. So much of the emotional impact is lost when so much of the game is watching various things explode. My advice would be to focus on scenes that aren't necessarily large set pieces, but on small-scale emotional realizations. A choice that went wrong, coming to terms with the fact that life is now a constant fight, and the social implications of this will stay much longer in the memory than a fighter jet exploding into pieces spectacularly. This ties well into the overall theme of the campaign. The fact is, for sheer set-piece quality, you aren't going to be able to compete with Call of Duty now. Other shooters have far more money and fans behind them to be able to afford these elaborate moments. Make the story personal and relevant, bring it close to home, and the result will be a much more memorable campaign than other games will be able to offer. Number 3. Full package. One thing that the original Homefront was slated for was a very short campaign. Apart from the multiplayer, there was really little else to do. It doesn't take much to tack on a wave defense mode or something along those lines to beef up the overall product. Possibly even make an alternative multiplayer mode where you can fight over the campaign map for superiority, much like the World vs. World in Guild Wars 2 or the overall theme that was put in Planetside. But what I'm saying is that it won't hurt to add extra modes in future installments of Homefront, especially when the original offering was so bare and thin. It's hard to sell Homefront as a product to my friends or family if they didn't have online play, because in all fairness, €40 as it was back then was far too much for a less than 5-hour campaign. Number 4. Keep the multiplayer balanced. One thing that I loved about Homefront's multiplayer was the degree of fairness that came alongside it. For every gun, there was a counter weapon. For every vehicle, there was a way to destroy it. For every cheap tactic that the enemy could come up with, there was a way that you could defuse the situation. Most other FPS games bring a sense of unfair rage that I never really had with Homefront. Sure, some said it was clunky and slow, but I never had anyone moan about its inconsistency. Call of Duty. The multiplayer was easily the best part of the original outing, but this was also the case with Call of Duty, until they added so many extras that kept the game from being balanced because of all these other little bits and bobs that came into it. It made it grossly unbalanced and really overpopulated, overcomplicated. If we do see a Homefront 2, then it needs to keep the degree of balance that it had previously. Oh yeah, and the Battle Commander needs its own playlist, goddammit, man. Oh, hear that, do it. Battle Commander is a great mode to have in multiplayer. If you don't know what it is, look it up. Number 5.
These photos came to me by way of a friend with contacts deep in the Resistance.
Greater emphasis on character development. This is more for the characters that you'll meet during the campaign. Every person that you meet in Homefront was quite forgettable. You never really heard their personal stories or reasons for their rebellion. You never really heard anything from them at all. It was a crime to expect players to be sad when, spoiler alert, Connor gets blown up at the end of the game. We barely even knew the guy. We didn't know who he was, why he was there, or really anything about him. So, that being said, whoever we encounter for large parts of Homefront's 2 campaign, we need to be able to hear their stories, their personalities, and what drives them forward to fight. Games like Mass Effect have become so successful partly due to the characters that share the experiences with the player. Homefront needs to learn from this. Considering the unique backdrop, there is plenty that could be done to evoke a powerful emotional response from these NPCs. I'm not asking for the ability to date any of the chosen women or be proper brohams with the guys like in Mass Effect, but shedding some more light on these other characters will ultimately mean a better and more personal storyline for the player. Number 6. Improved graphics. This goes without saying, but Homefront came off as a bit dated in the graphics department. When it launched, really, it didn't wow many people. One thing that jumps out for me was the blood splatter effects looking better in a game like Doom. There will have to be various jumps on the graphics department to bring Homefront at the very least equal level with its competitors. However, considering the title is being developed by Crytek, I think Homefront are in pretty decent hands in this category. I'd be very, very shocked if it looked as dated as the original did at launch. While I'm a big supporter of gameplay over graphics, most gamers are looking to be impressed when they first see trailers of a game, and the graphics are a huge part of that. Number 7.
That's the last of them. Let's move.
Bring something unique to the table. While I understand this is incredibly hard to do so, especially in the games market where everything has already been done, it is quite important for Homefront to have a gameplay element that would be its calling card. Something that to make gamers really want to consider Homefront besides the rest of the shooters around. Some might argue that the franchise already has this with its unique background, but personally I think Homefront needs something in-game that gives it that extra little boost. It might be something that I've said earlier on, maybe with its world versus world style combat, but it needs something that would differentiate itself from other shooters and not be considered really a clone of them. And while I understand that this would be incredibly hard to do so, Homefront's success could be further boosted if it brings something that no other shooter out there currently has. Number 8. Create a villain. This is one thing that could really do well in Homefront. Many action games have lost their ability to tell a rich narrative involving the leader of the opposing side. The only real game recently in the FPS genre that really did this was Call of Duty Black Ops 2 with Menendez. But the original was guilty of this also, really leading you into mindless battles with nameless soldiers. But building an antagonist for the player to really get his teeth into, building into a final climactic battle at the end of the game, could lead to an immensely satisfying conclusion to the campaign as a whole. As a rebellion hero, your story will only be as legendary as the enemies that you defeat. Because of this, Homefront 2 will need its Batman-esque supervillain that will, at the beginning, seems unstoppable really. I'm not saying this needs to be Kim Jong-un himself, far from it in fact. But I do believe that the main villain of the game needs to be up there, really, at the top of the list for screen time, in order to fully sell his unique personality and his cruel intentions with the American public. Number 9. Sell the background. For an idea with such huge writing credentials as John Milius, despite the fact that many believe he had very little to do with the writing process of the original, Homefront did very little in the way of explaining the fall of America as a superpower and the rise of the greater Korean Republic. Only through small tidbits of in-game collectibles really spread light on the current situation. But if the background had been handled better in the original game, there may have been some greater meaning to the rebellion. I've actually read the novel, so I have a little bit more of a grasp on Homefront's background, but the fact it was very much abandoned in the original game gives the sequel a chance to really tell its backstory, through varied characters, their experiences during the downfall of America, and the invasion of their own homes. Various gameplay mechanics can be born from this as well. You could have maybe a system of retrieving valuable pieces of equipment to stock up your rebel base, for farming and ammunition, stuff that would have come from its lore that you can basically bank on. It goes into much of what I've really said before though, but it's all well and good to simply give us the situation as it is, but in order to make it real for the player, the reasons and the history have to be efficiently displayed to us, so we know the reasons for what we are doing. Number 10. Don't release anything subpar. While not really an idea for the game per se, it's my final piece of advice for Homefront as a whole. While a series like Call of Duty can really safely do with a fairly subpar game, Homefront doesn't have that luxury. In my opinion, no series should ever release a game that common sense would dictate it's going to be really a slap to the face to everyone who buys it. But regardless, Homefront 2 has to be a massive game in order for the series to stay alive. All it takes is one fantastic game to really put Homefront firmly on the map, but one even remotely 70 to 80% game will be enough for gamers to forget about it and move on to better pastures. For me, Homefront has something right out of the gate that no other shooter can match it with. Its immensely unique background, its home route battleground sections and innovative multiplayer mechanics make it something different, something that is out of the norm for the usual FPS. If it can bank on those and build greatly on what it already has, then I am fully sure that Homefront can make it. In finality, THQ's current issues may mean we never see another Homefront game again, especially if its assets are purchased by a company that already has a huge marquee FPS franchise on its books. I do hope we see another Homefront, I really, really do, as one of the few die-hard fans of the original that is able to see the game for what it really is. If we do see another Homefront, I really want it to blow people's minds. So there you go, 10 ways to improve Homefront for the sequel. Please leave a comment if you have any other ideas or if you disagree what I've spoken about personally. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like, it really pushes me to make more high quality videos. And lastly, subscribe if you want to see any of my videos in the future, or if you just like to hear my sexy voice. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm TurboTony19, and goodbye.